All right, everyone. So, are you still hanging in there? How's the energy? Hey, that's what I wanted to hear. Awesome. Thanks for being such an amazing crowd today. So we're gonna close things off with a panel discussion, just as we did last year. So we'd like to welcome up the panelists on stage. So we have Anna Lushenko, engineer at Tide. We have Ezra, organizer of Flutter Berlin. Simon Lightfoot, CTO at Dev Angels. Greg Liebens, whom you all know. And last but not least, Majid, AI engineer at Microsoft. Welcome, Majid. New job title since last time.
Yes.
So I first wanted to talk about growth, and in particular, Flutter's growth. So we can now pretty confidently say that Flutter has overtaken React Native in terms of new projects. Yay. And as also, and as you can see on the crowd here, the Flutter community is growing. And it's now starting to really mature to the point where big companies are daring to take the leap towards Flutter. But now we're kind of also entering a new era, an AI developer era. So most of you probably know about VS Code Pilot, which Majid is working on as well at Microsoft. And there's also new types of IDEs like Cursor. So who have heard of Cursor before? Okay, a good amount of shown of hands. So Cursor is an IDE which is like generative AI first, where you can basically tell it what to build and it's going to build it for you. And in those kind of circumstances, do you think that all of a sudden now React Native is going to have an edge again because these large language models have so much more code, past code to train on? What do you guys think?
Who wants to take this? I mean, you're also saying that, are we going to be put out of jobs? Is that it? I mean, I've tried GitHub Copilot, and I find it gets in my way when I'm coding. Like, it will suggest stuff that's great, but equally it will suggest things that are wrong, right? Like, it will just invent functions and methods and all sorts that just don't exist. So, for me, it's great to have the tooling, but you have to know what you're coding as well, right? So it's great as a co-pilot, as something to assist you, but I don't think, you know, we're not there yet for sure that you just say, build me this and it'll be flawless, right? So you're still gonna have to understand what you're building to actually finesse it.
So, but do you think that React Native will have an advantage? Will we see that, like, will you get correcter results trying to create a React Native app with Flutter or with AI compared to doing an app with Flutter using generative AI?
It's hard to predict there, but it does seem, it stands to reason that it might, if they're able to train it on 10x, 100x. I don't know what the multiplier is of code in the wild between React Native and Flutter. I think that certainly stands to reason. I don't know if, to Simon's point, if any of them, you know, any LLM on any language currently rises to the level of being able to give you a complete enough answer where the human can just check out. And if, you know, if you're getting 80% accuracy on React Native and 60% accuracy on Flutter, which are of course numbers that I just made up, then in some sense, those are pretty similar because they're both requiring a proofreading pass from someone who can bat near 1,000, which is, sorry, terrible sports reference. Someone who's near 100% on their own as a human programmer. So I think the big question there, which is really the billion-dollar question in tech right now, is whether or not LLMs will get to the point where they're spitting out code that really doesn't need a person to audit. And I don't know if you want to talk about generative UI stuff at any point, but that's a paradigm that is the center of a lot of research and really only works if the LLM is actually writing nearly flawless code every single time.
So that's a great point. Let's circle back to generative UI later. And I wanted to ask Majid as well, like looking at the horizon, how do you think that this will evolve, and where do we see these tools being used in regular development teams?
I've been thinking about this question. First thing, let me have a disclaimer here. Whatever I say, it's my own opinion. I have to say this. So I feel like so far, if you look back in 2 years ago when these LLM came, and then afterwards different models and what right now we can do, in the beginning, so exciting, and then it gets a bit less exciting because we know what they do. And then if you look at it right now, I think that the path that we are going in this area is that we're getting away from more of, this is a model that is trained and is ready for you. Just go and type and get whatever you want, in a path that, okay, so we have some kind of model pre-trained, get this and build a custom model on top of this, and have a RAG application or whatever else, and then train the way that you want that LLM to generate code for you, to be more customized. And if you look at like recent, all of these AI tools and models that are coming, like I don't know if anyone knows GitHub models, for example, which technically you have access to many different LLMs and SLMs and so on. And then you can take them and then maybe build a RAG application and just train your data as well. And, and then you have a lot of these AI enterprise tooling that can really, you can feed your own data and train the model in a way that you want the model to generate the code. So I always want to bring this example when we talk about Copilot or these kind of generative AIs. It's like, the Copilot name, I really like it. It's just because it's actually a Copilot. So if you are right now, if you have a Tesla, if anyone has a Tesla, and if you put on the autopilot, after like 30 seconds, it says, put your hand on the wheels. You are the pilot of the Copilot. So that means it can go somewhere, but if you don't put your hand on that, after 2 minutes, you don't know where you are. So that's the way I think we're going right now, and I hope the tech industry goes. Like we kind of looking at these AI tools as a tool, really, that we train them, we educate them. Like we're talking about bad code that is generated, but you know that you can actually educate Copilot to write the code that you want in the same project that you are. Like you can literally say, Copilot, hey, give me exactly this error handling, which I did in the same file in this project or another file,
That's a great point, Majid. So have anyone of you been experimenting with using Copilot to do more things in your companies, Anna or Esra?
So personally, I'm using Copilot, GPT, Cursor. I'm just like giving a shot to everything that's going on. But Cursor, maybe my ideas can be a little bit not so objective because I'm currently using the free version, so it is limited also. But what I also see is like multiple points we do have there. One of them is, I think, losing the relevancy while they are suggesting the code. Because, like, for example, I am, again, these are all my own opinions. I am specifying what I want to do to, like, Copilot with, like, marking the files, like, everything, relevance, and so on. Then I'm getting a suggestion of code. Then I want to chat about it like I'm used to in ChatGPT, but then it's gone. It is just like, it started chatting me back like I never told the things before. It's really starts like a new conversation, and I am having trouble going through them. And then when I also tried Cursor, yes, it gave me better relevance because it was kind of give me the option of, okay, chat with your code base. I noticed that it kind of recognizes my code base and pattern more. But when I also switch it to like a little bit upgraded version like ChatGPT 4.0, then okay, again, lost the relevancy while suggesting the code after a couple steps and iterations. And what I noticed is, I think as junior people, mid-level people, I think it's great to understand the code and how it's working and so on, because personally it is helping me a lot, and it is probably reducing a lot of things that I'm going to go and ask my senior about, okay, how this is actually working. It is helping me a lot to grasp what's going on. But also some of the code recommendations we are getting, like, mostly needs to be polished, like your version. Like we just want to say, like, there is a better version of this. Like, can you just cover this edge case? This could be more optimized. Can you do it better? But I just know it because I had to do it in another language before. And it is not giving me like best suggestions in the beginning. It is just solving my problem in a normal way. That's what I think.
Thanks, Asra.
So, speaking of just a step back about comparing React Native and Flutter, I think we should really not focus on comparing, but ask ourselves, is it good enough? It doesn't matter if it is better in React Native, if it is good enough in Flutter. And with this, when I use this kind of tools, I constantly find myself reviewing the code. So with these tools, as opposed to usually think forward what I want to do and then how I will do it. Here, I quite often find myself being led by the ideas of the tools instead of having my idea first and then implement it. And I think it is, this experience is different for different level of developers. As a senior, I kind of can do it fine, I hope. For juniors, it might be even misleading sometimes, depending on the code base it was trained on. And once again, going back to the Flutter versus React Native, even though React Native may have a bigger code base to be trained on, Flutter is also quite open source, has a lot of projects, so it may already be good enough. Depends on what tasks we say it is good enough. As a copilot, it may already be good enough. As a standalone tool, I don't think it will ever be, sorry.
Yeah. Great points. I guess we just have to wait and see. So, Craig, you mentioned generative UIs, and when we talked backstage, you also mentioned that Flutter is in a really good position to be used for generative UIs. So, can you expand on that?
Yeah, so for anyone who's not familiar with the term generative UI, I don't know how broadly it's talked about, but obviously right now LLMs for the most part communicate in plain text with us all. But another thing that you can do with plain text is write code instead of paragraphs and then just render that code. And there's a pretty big push across Google to figure out how to enhance the experience of talking to Gemini. I'm sure all the players are doing this, you know, Anthropic with Claude and OpenAI with ChatGPT, to have the system basically just return an interface. So if you ask it, what are the best things to do in Stockholm, it might not just give you a plain text list, but it might give you an HTML page or a Flutter page or whatever. And that's going to have some images and links that you can click through, and you're just kind of off and running with this richer experience. And the angle that the Flutter team is taking within Google to try to position it as the ideal runtime for that is that Flutter uniquely would allow Gemini to master just one UI toolkit. It's obviously the exact same value proposition that has brought us all here. But yeah, so one of the things I said about that earlier is that that whole system is not very, you know, parse error or bug tolerant, because then you just immediately see nonsense or it doesn't run or whatever. And so I think that is really pushing the envelope. I believe Gemini doesn't really write code with parse errors. It might have a build method that invents a widget. It'll definitely do that, and that is a kind of compile error, right? But it doesn't miss curlies. It doesn't. It's getting there, and I think it's just hard to predict whether it will actually get to that goal line. But yeah, generative UI is a huge goal of Google's, and again, probably all of the big players. Yeah, and Flutter's trying to be the way that Google does that.
And I think that would be really, really interesting to see when we can see how it turns out. So let's switch topics a bit. So last year at this conference, in this panel, we also talked about the job situations for Flutter engineers. So Anna, you were here, and Majid, you were here as well. So what are your current outlooks on the Flutter job market right now from what you see around here in Europe?
Maybe I can start. So, because I was looking for a job actually in January, so it's quite new to me finding for a job. I think one thing that's happening right now is, in general, job market is tough right now. It's not about Flutter. Let's clear that out first, because since January until March, when I was applying different I couldn't find even a good title to apply. Not Flutter, just anything, This is very tough, economy and everything that we know right now. But then, when I looked at the Flutter jobs, in Europe, actually, I found quite a lot of jobs. What the problem was, all of them needed senior, very senior level, And a funny thing, many of them rejected me, so it's funny as well. I don't know what senior means, but what is interesting is that there's a lot of jobs. It probably doesn't pop up in many list of jobs for folks because it's in a level that people are not looking for. So I found these jobs definitely in Europe. It's definitely growing compared to last year. I think last year was worse, to my opinion.
Yeah. And I can also share that sentiment. I think anecdotally, from what I've seen here in Sweden, there are multiple big companies now looking to kickstart their Flutter projects. And because of that, they're looking for senior people because they have no internal knowledge of Flutter. Yeah. They just know that, oh, this is a tech that we want to get involved with. So Anna and Esra, we talked a bit about this as well behind the scenes. How does the situation look like for juniors, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, it's quite a challenging situation for junior still, the same as it was last year. For instance, myself, I have a friend, a junior Flutter developer, and she is going in circles through the interviews for a couple of months already in Ukraine, but I think the situation is the same in Europe, and clearly companies who only start to adopt Flutter require senior expertise. But I think they also need more hands actually doing stuff, which they can be advised how to do. So companies definitely could look into hiring juniors and interns to help out those seniors to actually produce more features faster.
I can give a bit of a side of this as well. I think there's a value proposition here. So from a perspective of a large company, they'll want to employ juniors because they can be trained and become an asset to the company. Whereas if you've got a lot of small tech startups, they need someone to come in with a certain skill level. So for example, with Flutter, because it's cross-platform, you want someone that's got experience on Android, on iOS, as well as Flutter. So they can then go into the depths, maybe create plugins, create very specific things that make their product work across the broader scope of what you can deliver with Flutter. And I think the problem is that is a skill set that's quite high, and there's a limited amount of people that actually have that skill set right now. So it's just in the best interest of the community as a whole to learn the specifics of the platforms you're trying to deliver Flutter on, as well as Flutter itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment as well. Do you guys see in a foreseeable future, where we're going to see job ads for senior Flutter engineers without like a native background, where the plugin ecosystem and everything you need has reached a certain amount of maturity so that you can basically stay in Dartland without hardly ever going down to native land.
I don't see that happening per se. I think you might find team sizes getting larger where you've got an Android specific person, you've got an iOS specific person, and you've got your Flutter people. Does that kind of make sense? I think there's a joining there that can actually take place. So a company that's saying that we're building a Flutter app, what they actually are asking for is someone that's Flutter and having those skill sets in those other platforms as well. So there'll be a larger team size, not just like one person working for a tech startup that's expected to know everything.
Yeah, I share this sentiment as someone who works in the fintech industry where our banking app uses a lot of native dependencies for various features. We constantly find ourselves in the situation where this or that library doesn't work on this or that platform, and those are developed by third-party vendors which we have limited influence on, and they may not always provide Flutter SDKs, but rather natives. So we constantly have to keep this skill set of native developer.
So personally, I also have some multiple points to expand on this one. And first one actually starts with the job market. And as a person who doesn't have a native development background and switching area and using Flutter in the first place, I had different let's say, milestones in my life while looking for a Flutter job since 2020. Like, first one was looking for first mobile development app, and then it was for the relocation, and it was for relocation again. So I also had a chance to go through a job market multiple times in different positions, in different variations, while market is evolving. And how can I actually say is, in the beginning, like around 2000, for me, 2020, 2021, we had startups like, yeah, you would get paid a little bit lower, but they will also give you some time to learn about it, and you will actually, like, startups were also like a door to learn and step up as a junior in the beginning in the Flutter. But right now, what I also see in the market, I see a lot of job openings, a lot of like new developers, a lot of Flutter developers, but there is a gap about like finding a match, like fitting what is going for. And I actually have 3 points. I actually noted 3 of them here so that we can actually talk about it and not miss it. And one of them is, even we had one of the talks, it was related to background processing. And like, I think people are looking for directly senior Flutter devs while hiring directly, and then we don't see like junior, mid to like people to raise and like learn, train on the way. I think it's amazing asset, but I think the expectations of the market is also evolved on the way. I started to see like lots of agencies showed up and started to put some MVP products with Flutter, and then it kind of started getting marketed like that. So it also gave people expectations of like super quicker deadlines, faster deliveries. Like sometimes we are even having like unrealistic deadlines for like, okay, we want to release this app in 3 months because we have an event. It will not be an app we're going to use later. We need this app in 3 months. Even as senior mobile devs, we are like, can we make it in 3 months, like bug-free, like it still is good in this front? And their budget is too low, even for us to like have hands-on seniors like do this. I cannot see we are also getting a junior on board and training it on the way, then it will be cost from our pocket even. We don't even know what we're gonna do. So it is actually getting a junior harder to step up.
And maybe that's a reflection of like the bigger macroeconomic, like we talked about. It's hard finding jobs in any category right now, and that's why companies are really pushing the budgets down a lot.
There's another point to this. So Flutter's grown. So the people that I don't know. Imagine the first year Flutter came out. Maybe there was just 100 developers that were working with Flutter. The next year, 1,000. The next year, 10,000. The year after that, 100,000, million. And so because it's grown so much, there's a lot of Flutter developers that are maybe 1-2 years of experience, and that they're asking for the senior level, and this is going to take time for everyone to move up, if that kind of makes sense, for it to grow.
So circling back to the, did you have another?
I will add something on this one. I think this is pretty great point because once the Flutter is launched, then people are started to like go for it, try it. We had early adopter developers onboarded in Flutter. And then Flutter also becomes something like, you know what, you can even start mobile development even if you don't know native iOS and like Android. Let's give it a start mobile app development with Flutter. Then we had some newbies with no background information or like native background information like me. I wasn't an Android developer nor iOS developer. I immediately started with Flutter. We started learning it all. It's good. So first couple years, it's good. Like your 3 years developing Flutter, you can still find a job. 3 years developer experience is good. I'm talking about 2021, 2022. And then meantime, we had a lot of iOS developers and Android developers resisting to change and adapt to Flutter, and they were holding back to see whether Flutter gonna go better, what the Kotlin multi-platform will be, what the storyboards, iOS, what we're gonna do, and so they were holding it back. Then they see that, okay, Flutter is keeping going, let's adjust a little bit, let's see it more. And then when they switched to Flutter, then immediately we had, I think it's also like good parameters that we had a huge gap between juniors and seniors, because then we started to have like 10 years mobile development experience in Android, started Flutter now. Then like as a 3 years experienced mobile dev, now in 1 year, there is a person bringing 10 years of experience to the table from Android and then adjusting Flutter now. Okay, we have lots of seniors also can do Flutter now from iOS and Android. So I think that's also one of the good parameters, how we end up with so many seniors and getting those people and requirements.
And when web launched, Flutter Web, there's a huge influx of web developers that came to Flutter as well.
Yeah.
It's augmented, but yeah.
Yeah, those are really good points. So I wanted to circle back as well to like getting more like Flutter native developers, people who start out building with Flutter as their first framework, Dart as their first programming languages, and getting them to a point where they can be senior and taking care of projects on their own. I think from a technical perspective, there's things we can do to ease that as well. So I know there are, tell me if I'm wrong, but there are projects where native APIs are currently being auto-translated to Dart. I think it's used in some of core plugin is starting to do it as an alternative to the federated plugin approach.
It's probably bindings for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that could be a way to kind of, so you don't need to code Swift, you don't need to code Kotlin, you have access to all the native platform interfaces, but you do it in Dart. So you only need to know Dart, and then you can learn frameworks.
We're all waiting on macros.
Yep.
There's the stuff that you're talking about is exciting, and so for anyone who's not familiar with this, if you've heard of FFI, right, foreign function interface, it's a way to call code in a different language in your same thread. And there's also JNI, which is JavaScript native interface. And the Flutter team and the Dart team really is working on ways to, with very little effort, have probably via macro, but I'm not sure. Slava could maybe clarify for us what the actual pipeline and build mechanics will be, but to very easily generate some bindings for, let's say you want to use the camera and the camera plugin doesn't exist. Actually, it doesn't exist on macOS, so this is like a real problem. But you want to use some API that you know exists on all the platforms you want to target. And so, okay, great news. You can just import camera.swift, import camera.android, which are of course made up paths. And then what the build system is going to do is generate FFI and JNI bindings so that you can call into those APIs directly from Dart. But the hidden complication is that none of those steps actually make those APIs align. They're still different. They require different parameters. They have different concepts. They have maybe different life cycles. They're still fundamentally different camera APIs that Apple and Google designed without talking to each other. And staying in pure Dart is great you know, it's better than having to think about method channels and whatnot. But whenever in the past you've had to do one of those things, you've had to talk to native in either a federated plugin way or whatnot. The real trick is figuring out how to capture the full surface area of each of those native APIs in a consistent and single Dart API. And that challenge will still remain. And I think that's more fun, right? I like the idea of figuring out a clean, idiomatic Dart API that wraps these different, you know, mutually exclusive, don't agree on anything camera APIs, just to run with this example more. But it's still a serious engineering challenge.
I mean, we have a problem, right, in terms of a lot of these plugins choose least common denominator, right? So the simplest functionality that can spread the platforms. And yeah, that's not where we need to go.
No. So we have to end on that final note, and let's give it up for all of our panelists. Thank you very much.